news right now.
You've tuned in to Motorcycle Radio. Please note, turning off this podcast may damage your radio. And here's your host, Ian Richardson.
Okay, welcome to the Motorcycle Radio podcast. I'm your host, Ian Richardson, and you're listening to the best motorcycling podcast in the world, probably. So today, I'm thrilled to introduce Damian Rowley, aka Demon, and he's joining us all the way from Mexico City, which I hope is a bit warmer and a bit brighter than it is here in sunny Yorkshire, where it's 4:28 on the 2nd of January 2025, and it's pitch black outside and 2 degrees centigrade. Hi Damien, welcome. How are you?
Hello mate, yeah, good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, it is a little bit warmer here. It's
good.
About 20 degrees at the moment, sun's out. It will get up to about 25 today because we are in the winter, and Mexico City is about 7,500 feet up, so it's a bit cool at night, but it's nice.
I suppose that's a benefit for people that live there then, to sleep and have a bit of cool to sleep in.
Yeah, I mean, the middle of Mexico is all mountains anyway, and lots of volcanoes and stuff. So the big cities tend to have been built up high just because in the summer it's 40 odd degrees. Yeah. It's crazy.
So what brings you to Mexico City, and where are you from? And tell us a bit about yourself.
Oh, mate, that's a long story. So what brings me here? My little KTM 690 has brought me all the way here. Bit about myself. Well, I'm from just outside London, in a little place called Weybridge near Surrey. Grew up in Shepperton, lived in Sunbury-on-Thames for many, many years. Spent a lot of years riding motorbikes, and I decided at my grand old age it's time to ride one around the world. So I shipped my bike to North America, and here I am now.
Wow! So that was a very condensed version of how you. What you did. What was your when did you first start riding? Was it like me? I mean, I was 16. Just because I couldn't drive a car till I was 17 in the UK, you can only get a moped. That was my way of getting about my town. What about you? That
was pretty much it. So at 14, 15, I knocked around with a load of guys in cars, and I wanted a car. I wanted girls in the back and music playing, and the arm out the window kind of thing. And at 16, I just literally got a bike for a year for transport. And there was a couple of other guys I knew who rode bikes as well. And then that grew into a group of 20 or 30 or 40 of us. And we just rode everywhere. We did everything. And I just got hooked. It was like taking crack. Cars then were completely off my radar. And then at 17, I bought myself a little RG125, full racing levers, and I rode around like an absolute twat. And my apprenticeship went down the pan. I was an apprentice HGV mechanic, so I thought, I'll ride a bike for 6 months as a job. So I became a London dispatch rider at 17 and a half, and that ended up being nearly 10 years as a motorcycle courier, whizzing around London and up and down the country. In that time, I was riding way beyond anything that I should have been doing on the road. Every roundabout was a racetrack for me, and I got the nickname Roundabout Rowley. So one day I'd gone down to Brands with a guy I knew on a GSXR 750, and we were sitting there watching the club racing, sitting at Druids, and I said to him, I'm going to do that one day. And he just looked at me and laughed his head off. He said, yeah, whatever. Anyway, a couple of years later, I decided it's time I did it. Bought myself 350 power valve, and I started club racing. I was 19, almost 20, so really quite late for racing. So the next few years, I raced 350 power valve. I raced a single cylinder, and it was either win it or bin it, or it broke. You know, I was a budget racer. I was using second-hand tires that I would put on back to front. I would do any race I could just to be out on the track. And then within a couple of years, I moved up to 600 Super Sport. I was doing okay, but you know, the guy had ex-British Championship bikes, and I could never compete on the faster circuits. So then this thing called the CB500 Cup came out, and it was the year that a certain James Toseland kicked all of our butts. So that was my step up to British Championship. Did a couple of seasons of the CB500s, and then I did the Hornet Cup. And at that same point, I also managed to land myself a job with Virgin Limo Bike, which was a motorcycle taxi firm in London. I was actually racing with one of the guys who just started there. So that was me then stepping away from being a motorcycle courier into being a taxi bike in London. And then through injuries and other bits and bobs, I decided I can no longer race. You know, I need to buy a house. And that was kind of it for me. I then stepped across to doing a bit of instructing. Even though I'd done some on the road, it never interested me that. Right. And I landed a job with Ron Haslam at the race school at Donington Park.
Oh, yeah.
So I spent the next 4 years commuting up to Donington Park to work as a motorsport instructor for him, whizzing around Donington all day long, which was absolutely amazing. What better way? You know, I'm getting paid by Virgin because I was working for them. Yeah. I was getting paid by Ron Haslam to work for him. And I was living my dream. I was riding motorbikes every day for a job. Oh, yeah. What better way to go to work every day other than, you know, living your passion, your dreams, you know, the things that make you happy. And then just through complete chance, I met this client of mine who was based in Belfast, and he sponsored a couple of riders and said to me, you know, if you ever want to go back or anything, you know, let me know. I'll see what I can do. And this was a guy called John O'Neill. And he became my personal sponsor. So just off a whimsical thing, I said to my old engine tuner, I was out for dinner with him at a friend's birthday, certain Mark Hill from MHP Racing at that time, or Mark Hill Performance, that does the exhaust systems now.
Yeah.
I said, hey, fancy doing a bit of endurance racing? He went, yeah, go on, why not? So I set up a small team with him. I went, it was my first season back to racing, and we did the British Endurance Championship. And back then it was run by KRC. We didn't do particularly well. We had a lot of breakdowns and other issues. We had fun, but you know, it wasn't the dream I had of coming back to racing and just, you know, whatever. But you know, it was good. And then the next year I rode for another team, and we finished second in the championship. We should have won the championship, but in the last round we had an engine failure. But with that 2 years of experience of endurance racing, I then got an offer from Phase One Endurance, and I stepped up to do the World Endurance Championship. So 2006, I went and did my first season of the World Endurance. So I did the Assen 500, the Le Mans 24 Hour, the Boulder, wow. Oschersleben, etc. And we did really well, actually. In our first season, the team as a whole, I rode with a Polish guy and a Belgian guy. We finished 9th in the World Championship.
Wow, amazing.
So yeah, I was living my dreams. I was racing motorbikes. I was riding a motorbike around London for a job. You know, it was fantastic, and did that for another couple of years. And then, yeah, the motorbike taxi thing that started for me was in 1999. I was very privileged to get that job. Jobs just didn't come up. They were like chicken's teeth, and I waited 18 months to get in there. And it was almost like a last post for dispatch riders. You know, all of us were ex-couriers. And I was basically ferrying around the rich and famous, as well as corporate business and other stuff like that.
What bikes did you use for that then?
Well, when I first started there in '99, we were riding the old ST 1100, the Pan European.
Yeah.
And the company had been going 4 years at that point. Most of the work back then was more corporate stuff. we were set up as a transfer to and from the airport for the upper class passengers. So if you bought an upper class ticket, you got a transfer either by car or by train, or in this case, by motorbike to the airport.
Right.
And it became so popular, people wanted it for all sorts. And then the TV companies started picking up on us, and the model agencies and stuff like that. So, so until I think it was 2001, we were basically sponsored by Honda. And we had a fleet of ST1100s, which were all branded up in different Virgin companies.
Wow.
So I was lucky enough to be involved in, festivals and, all the Virgin launches and parties and red carpet awards like the Brit Awards, bringing pop groups to the events. So give or take a bit, I did that for 25 years.
To be honest, that's amazing. I have ridden as a passenger on a motorcycle taxi, but I was just some fat bloke that they thought, Jesus, give me a helmet liner. You better put this jacket on. This is the biggest one we've got, type thing, But it were great, and I think for me, the massive benefit for me, of course, was the ability to not get stuck in traffic. Straight to the front.
Time is money.
Yeah,
time is money.
Yeah, definitely, and it weren't crazy expensive, from what I can recall. Yours sounds like it were a bit more expensive than mine.
it became quite exclusive. 2001 Yamaha, when they started sponsoring, Virgin started sponsoring the Yamaha team with Rob Mack, and back then it was Neil Mackenzie. That's when we then switched from Honda across to Yamaha, and Yamaha supplied us the fleet of FJR 1300s. So for the next 20 odd years, I've been riding an FJR 1300, but because of the type of work we were doing and the clientele, we were an exclusive service.
Right.
We were cab prices and a bit more, depending on what we were doing. So it became a niche clientele, shall we say, of rich and famous.
Well, the last one I used was only in July, actually, this year.
Thailand?
Philippines.
Yeah.
Which was Grab. They do a Grab bike. It used to be Uber, but they were bought out by Grab, and Uber's been pinned in the Philippines. And they use these little Honda 150, like they do.
The 150 Win, I think they got out there. Yeah.
And just got a helmet on his elbow. And it were like, I remember going on to Grab. I did it by mistake, actually. I did Grab thinking a cab. So this was like 300 pesos, which is like £6. And this one was like 47 pesos. I thought, I'll have that. And this kid turned up on this, like, just give me a helmet off his elbow, put it on. And 20 minutes later, I was like, wow, that was great. Honestly.
Yeah, I must admit, when I was in Thailand, in Bangkok, I did see them, and I thought, no, I can't go on one.
I was watching my knees, because he was going through at his knee width, not mine.
Like I would say to my clients, I use my panniers as whiskers. If I go donk, 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 I know I'm too close. Other than that, it's fine.
Wow, that's an amazing experience. I mean, I've had lots of people on this podcast, and people have got some really great, history that they tell me about how they started and things they've done. But I don't think anyone has had such a comprehensive bike-related background like that. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, it became, passion became a way of life. It became a living. It became everything I did. I would say I'm an old school biker, even though I don't have tattoos and beards and, that kind of, I'm old school biker. It was definitely a way of life. Whereas nowadays people are much more motorcyclists than it was back in the 80s when I started.
Yeah, definitely. And I often have on the British Motorcycling Group, people say that will always start that conversation about a biker and a motorcyclist. And I'm like,
they're quite different.
You know what I mean? It's a never ending question, isn't it?
And I don't know whether nowadays people just put you in that circle of you're a motorcyclist because you don't see the old style bikers anymore. I don't know. But back in my day, I remember there's multiple times of breakdowns, things, but there was this one guy I was up in the Midlands somewhere, and he was broken down on the side of the road. It was winter. He was waiting for the AA to pick him up, and that was when the AA used to actually arrive. But I went to the next town. I bought him some fish and chips. I took him back to him, and then it became a friendship for many years. We'd pass each other in London, and then there was another guy who saw me get dragged down the road underneath a lorry and was there for me. And then I would met up with him a few days later when I got out of the hospital, and the man was in tears, oh, but those old school bikers have definitely disappeared. The motorcycle fraternity. Yeah, we're getting old, aren't we?
Well, yeah.
The motorcycle fraternity is still strong.
Yeah.
It's just a different one now.
Yeah, it is. And I guess, I'm 60, and I know, I don't look it. But not since I accidentally shaved my beard off this morning. And I am, I nod at everybody. I even nod at Uber riders, and I just nod at people. And if they don't nod back, sometimes I think, tosser. Other times I just think, whatever, but I do nod at everybody. And if you're not from the UK, the nod is the equivalent of the leg out or the fingers down if you're in the States. But
two fingers
down. It's a way of acknowledging another biker. And I do that. And I also, I have been known to stop quite often if I see a bike broke down. Even if I'm in a car, I'll pull over. And, I remember being in the car with Mary, my wife, and saw this guy at the side of the road. And, he could have just been having a fag, I guess. But I thought, well, I'll check if he is, fine. And I pulled over, and he said, "Oh, I've had a leak on my petrol tap, and I've run out of petrol." He says, "I haven't got mobile." I went, "No problem, mate." I said, well, "I'll go and get you some." And I didn't have a petrol can in the car, so we went to the garage, and I bought one. And my wife were like, "Seriously, going to buy one?" I said, "Yeah, come in handy. I'll always need one at some point, surely." She says, "Your car's a diesel, so is mine." I'm like, well, you know what? I've got bikes as well. So it's a small thing to do. It's a little thing to do. And I took it back to him. I cut a bit off his pipe because it was split as it went on. He'd not got a clip on it. It was an old ER500, I think. And I basically cut a bit of the petrol pipe off, fitted it back on, got some wire out my car, twisted it on, give him what I think 10 litres of fuel or whatever was in, 5 litres in that. And my wife went, "Who would do that?" And I said, "Well, what would he do? He hasn't got a phone. He's literally stood at the side of the road." And I'd like to think someone would do that for me, because that's how it is.
It's I've learned this on this journey, the phrase, pay it forward. So at some point that will be paid forward. When he does it for somebody else, that will always be remembered. And it's just pay it forward. And I've done that already on my journey.
Have you?
Pay stuff forward. Yeah.
It's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it makes you feel good.
It does, yeah. And there's this saying about it's better to give than receive. And I know it's a bit of a cliche, but I think it's true. Certainly in our world, it's a nice thing to do. Makes you feel good, and you've done a bit for them, because that could be, it could be, well, I suppose crazy as it sounds, it could be life-changing. You don't know where he's going for what reason.
100%.
So, yeah,
100%.
Definitely great. I love that. I am a biker or a motorcyclist, whatever you want to call me, but I am old style. Yeah, I like that. So you've done all that. When you were doing that motorcycle, it was more than a taxi, wasn't it? Like a limo, you said, really. It was more like a...
Yeah, the company was called Limo Bike, but we were basically a motorcycle chauffeur, really, because you couldn't hail me in the street because I wasn't a Hackney carriage. You still have to ring up and book. Yeah, exactly that. But it was a very exclusive thing. So it could be the fact that I was rushing someone from one TV studio to another for live TV. It could be meeting someone off a flight. It could be all sorts of things, but it was exclusive.
And are you allowed to say, did you have any of the rich and famous, or anyone that anyone would know on your bike?
Yeah, all sorts. A lot of the mainstream TV celebs that you see, Anton Deck, the people on GMTV, people on Capital, Heart Radio, people like Graham Norton. The list is long and endless. Sir Kenneth Branagh, Sir Ian McKellen, all of those clients are the people we would deal with. I could be picking them up from home or a TV studio, say, or they would be going for an appointment, whatever they were using it for. Time is money. I mean, let's just use Sir Ian McKellen, as we call him, Gandalf, because that's, everyone knows him as Gandalf. We'd pick him up at home, we would take him to the theatre, and then at the end of the show at 10, 11 o'clock at night, he'd get back on the bike to go home because it was the only way he wanted to travel. He didn't want to do the tube anymore, sit in cars. Sir Kenneth Branagh, for example, lived not far from where I was, so I would take him to and from whatever. It could be to the football. People like Kylie Minogue, Cara Delevingne, Ryan Reynolds, lots of ex-football players, Gary Neville, Lee Dixon, David Beckham. The list is 25 years of it. Yeah. And these people became regular. Like you have your hairdresser, not that you have much hair left anymore, neither do I. You would build that rapport with someone, that relationship.
Yeah.
There'd be trust there, because I know where they live. I have their phone numbers, their emails, everything. Yeah. That trust takes years to build. And that was also why people came to us, because of who we were, or still are. Unfortunately, I'm no longer part of the... Totally. We never advertised. It was all word of mouth. Someone described us like the A-team. If you want us, you'll find us. And they did. They found us.
Honestly, I don't know about other people that are listening, but I never really anticipated that people did this. I mean, I know it exists, obviously, as I say, I've used it, but like the rich and famous, I just assumed they'll be in a Bentley going, down a bus lane because they can afford to pay the fine.
No, they'll be sat on the back of a motorbike getting wet and cold with me as well. But,
that's amazing. Wow.
It's quite a grounding thing, the bike. When they get on the back, they are trusting me with their life because their life is in my right hand.
Yeah.
And also what was nice about the bike, especially in the early days, is you had anonymity.
Yeah.
You didn't know who you were.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I had Kylie on the bike and we pulled up next to this transit van and the guy's looking across and then he kept looking. He said to her, "Are you Kylie?" She went, No, I'm just a lookalike. She said, "You really look like her." She said, "Well, that's why I do that as a job." We were pissing ourselves laughing as we rode off through the traffic. But a lot of people just didn't know that it was somebody on the bike.
Yeah.
So it would be a good way of getting people in and out, especially when we put a black visor or something on. You didn't know who was on the bikes.
Yeah. Wow. Really, really, I would say exciting. It is exciting, I suppose. I don't, it's not run-of-the-mill job at all, is it?
It's not. It is a hard job as well. People think it's all fun and glamour, you're whizzing around celebrities. But when it's 5 o'clock in the morning and I'm leaving the house and it's pissing with rain and it's -2 and it's dark and I'm fighting traffic to get to an airport or something like that, it's not all glamour. It's still a hard way to earn a living. And it's a high pressure job, not only my safety, but also the client safety. I'm hurling a 250 kilo motorbike through London traffic, sometimes with a 20-stone guy sat on the back with a lump of luggage.
Yeah.
It's hard work.
You don't have to drop many to lose or damage the reputation, do you?
Touch wood. In 25 years, I only had one. And we'll leave it at that. We won't go any further. One. And I think as a company in 30 odd years, maybe 2, 3, it really isn't many. And because we're good at what we do.
I'm going to say not just good, but you said early on when you said you had the incredible opportunity to become a rider for them. Well, that's not by accident, is it? They knew your background and they knew that you were going to be up to it.
They basically tested me over a year, giving me part-time work, because also when I started, I was young. I was 26 when I got that job. And most of the guys there were mid-30s upwards. And for the insurance, we didn't know at the time, you had to be 30. But for some reason, I was put on the insurance. And it was only, I think, when I was about 28, that they said, "Oh, yeah, no one under 30. And he said, "Well, hold on, we've got this guy." And they said, "Well, we can't." But he's been on the insurance for the last couple of years. And I was like, oh, okay, well, he's an exception.
Wow.
So, I also made sure I went out and got my advance. Back then, I think it's still called the IM. I did that.
Yeah.
I put myself through that course, which I did one lesson, and then I went and did the test. And actually, halfway through the test, the instructor stopped me. And he said, I think I've seen enough. And I'm like,
Oh no!
I know what's happened. I know what's happened. It was that twisty, wet road with the leaves. I lost him. I was just gone. And he said, I think I've seen enough. Your riding is perfect.
Really?
And he signed me off there. Yeah, literally 20 minutes on the test. Normally it's about 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
And 20 minutes. And he was an ex-copper.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, our riding is good. You know, learning to ride as a London dispatch rider, you learn so much. You really do. You know, all the different weather conditions, the traffic conditions, the anticipation, clutch control, machine control, everything. So then when you go and do a job like I ended up doing, you've had years and years of natural training before you even get there. So yeah, I had 10 years as a dispatch rider.
Interesting. Something that came to mind when you were, you know, you've done both these jobs, I guess, both dispatch riding, which means, you know, I have had documents that's been brought to me to be signed and returned immediately. So somebody's thought, I need it doing today. You know, for a property or something, they've said, I need it doing today. Can you get here? And I'm like, no, right, I'll get it to you. And that's been brought by someone literally come outside my house on a bike with a top box, came to the door, come in, do you want a coffee? No, I ain't got time, mate. Just sign that and give it me back, please. And off you went. Fantastic. But go on, I'm sorry. You want to say?
It's dispatch riders aren't paid a lot of money. So he's probably got 3 other jobs on that bike that he wants to knock out to get paid. So that's why he doesn't want to stop for coffee. He's not being rude. He just wants money.
Yeah, he just wants to make his money. Yeah. So knowing London quite well, and knowing the area that you were knocking around in, sort of Shepperton, and I don't know it well, but I could ride around it. Did you have to do anything like cab drivers do to prove that you could do it? Like, because I guess that was pre-sat-nav days, wasn't it? When you started?
Yes. So when I first started, it was the old-fashioned way of an A to Z.
Yeah.
I had no mobile phone. We had a radio on the bike, which would have a limited distance, 20, 30 miles. So we used to use a lot of phone boxes. So my first ever week of being a motorcycle courier was absolutely disastrous. So at that time I was living in Charlton Village near Shepperton, and I had to get to Wembley, which was only, I think, 18 miles, 20 miles. But I couldn't use a motorway. I was on L plates. So I had to use an A to Z and figure my way out how to get to Wembley. Why I started at a company so far from home, so difficult, I don't know. But then from Wembley, I then had to figure my way out in and out of London. But I had no geography. I was 17, you know, I'd only been riding just over a year.
Yeah.
So a job that should have taken me 20 minutes would take me like 2 hours, because I was flicking backwards and forwards across the pages, trying to figure stuff out. Oh, I know where that is. I'll ride to that point. So yeah, my first week was disastrous. And the controller, actually, at the end of my second week, when we'd gone out to the pub afterwards, he said to me, you know, after that first week, I wanted to get rid of you. He said, you were absolutely terrible. He said, but actually the second week, you really stepped up your game. You really started to figure things out. And from then on, I just went from strength to strength. And yeah, it was learn the old fashioned way, look at a map, memorize it, ride a bit until you get to that point of, I'm not quite sure. And then look at a map again.
And then it opens to experience.
Yeah, and I don't think I got my first sat-nav, and it was an early one. We were doing a job for the BBC when I was at Virgin, and they stuck these Garmin Street Pilots on our bike, and they were horrendous. But we were doing a game show around the country, and we had bikes stationed around the country with a camera crew and what have you, and we would rush to an address and do a live broadcast with them. And because we didn't have maps for every town and place that we could possibly end up, we had to use these Street Pilot things, and they were so old and clunky. They kind of got you there, but it wasn't really, I suppose, until Google that we started really using sat navs. The rest of it was still, even until I'd probably been there 10 years by then, before I stopped using a map. But I always carried one in my pannier, regardless. I still had one, even till I quit back in May. I still had an A to Z in my pannier, 35 years on from when I started.
Have you, on your journey now, have you ever forgot that what you're doing and pick somebody up and give them a lift?
No, I've got no space. I've got too much luggage.
Yeah. I could just imagine you pulling up. Get on, mate. Like, what?
Actually, say that I have actually picked somebody up. We were on the Dempster Highway going up to Tuktoyaktuk at the top of the Arctic Circle, and there was a KLR at the side of the road broken down, and there was a bicycle on the back of it. And half a mile up the road, there was this figure just trudging along. It turned out to be a lady, and stopped, spoke to her. She said, just jump on the back. We'll go back. We'll see if we can get your bike going. So me and the guy I was traveling up with, we then went back, got her bike running, found out the story of how she had this bicycle on her bike. And this is a whole nother story, but I'll condense it quickly. So we'd been riding the Dempster Highway. I don't know if you know the Dempster Highway. It's a dirt road that runs 900 kilometers from the Alaska Highway to the Arctic Circle in Canada, up through the Yukon and Northern Territory.
Right.
And it's become a bit of a mecca for overlanders. It used to be the Dalton because you could get up there, but when you get to Prudhoe Bay, you then have to get a minibus.
Yeah.
So now a lot of people are using the Dempster because you can ride all the way to the Arctic Ocean. Anyway, we had seen this KLR at oh god, where was it? It will come to me in a moment. The first fuel stop on the Dempster, which is 400 kilometers.
Right.
Eagle Plains, that was it. Eagle Plains. We'd seen this KLR with this strange bracket off the back of it, and we couldn't figure it out. Anyway, we then saw this KLR again 2 days later up at Inuvik. With this bicycle on the back. And what had happened was she'd left her bike at Watson. She'd cycled the next 500 kilometers to the Arctic Ocean, and then come back on hitchhiking with a bicycle, and then put a bicycle on the back of the KLR. And that's when we saw her. Anyway, so that was me picking her up off the side of the road. We got her bike running for her. She then rode with us to Tuktoyaktuk and then back to Inuvik, which was a round trip of about 300 kilometers with a bicycle on the back of hers, which was crazy. So yes, I have picked somebody up along my journey, but she didn't pay.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, what a shame. Last time you pick anybody up then.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. So you said there that that you, when you packed your job in back in, did you say February?
May. Yeah,
So
May 2024.
Is that when you started this journey?
Yeah. This journey, I quit the job on, I think it was the 20th of May, after literally 25 years full-time, 26 and a bit part-time, because I did 18 months part-time. So yeah, I quit that job. I got sweet Fanny Adams. So
You're
Kerry,
joking.
I'm still waiting for
I
my
hope they're
thank you
watching.
very much present. Nah,
Send them this.
yeah, I will do. Yeah, no, nothing. He thought about buying me a key ring, and that was about it. So yeah, 25 years of service, and I got nothing. Unbelievable. So yeah, I quit that in May, and then I shipped my bike and myself to North America, to Toronto.
Wow.
Where I started.
And was that? Is this your first big journey, Damian, or?
Oh, what do you call big though? So
well, overseas journey.
No. So I mean, I've done a few trips to Europe, a week here, a week there for different things. My ex-wife was from France, so I'd go a lot across on the bike to France and do bits and bobs. A few bits with work. We'd been down to Strasbourg and we're down to Mete and things with work. But my first proper trip, I suppose, when I flew out to Vietnam, and I bought a little bike in Hanoi, and I spent a month traveling from Hanoi to Saigon. And then a couple of years later, I flew out to Delhi, got a bike in Delhi. I did a 3,000 kilometer journey around the north of India, back to Delhi over a month.
And what bike did you buy in India?
It had to be a 350 Bullet.
I'm going to say, I'm going to anticipate that, but yeah, I thought I'd let you.
Yeah, you have to. You have to. It's got to be an Enfield, and it was great. Had a few little problems with it. Split fuel tank, broken rack. Got those fixed at the side of the road like you do.
Yeah.
In Vietnam, we had a clutch go on a bike, and I had to push it a kilometre back to a village where this guy spent the next 3 hours measuring the discs and with his vernier gauges and seeing if this one would fit. And eventually, you know, after a lot of green tea and faffing about, I was on the way again for, I think, about $3, which was amazing. And I had a free lunch. So, you know. So no, those, and I did a trip through Portugal, 2020, you know, during the end of COVID, with that first bit of COVID. Went to the bottom of Portugal and back on my KTM.
Right. Is that the same bike you've got now?
That is the same bike I've got now,
That was its first taste of, was it?
Proper taste, yeah. I did bits in the UK, bit of TET, stuff like that, but that was the first time it was like, right, I'm going a proper adventure journey now. And 3 weeks down through the middle of Portugal, down to the Algarve, and then back up, sort of crisscrossing with Spain, a bit of the TET. That was the first one on the KTM.
And did you buy this KTM because you've been riding very different bikes professionally, both racing bikes or touring bikes for the for the limo stuff?
Yes, I mean, bike wise for me, I was very much into sports bikes, dirt bikes. My first ever bike was a little ER50 or TS50 ER, a little scrambler. Back in the day, they were called scramblers. And then it was all sports bikes, really, and then sort of practical bikes for work. And then when I was working at Virgin, I didn't need a bike. I had a company bike. So when I had an R1 and stuff like that, eventually I sold them. I didn't need them. I didn't have a motorbike for a lot of years. And then my ex-girlfriend was riding a Hornet, and I wanted a bike to go and ride with her because she wanted me to go ride at weekends. And when you ride 800, 1,000 miles every week, going for a pointless ride at the weekend, you like just get
unpaid overtime.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're riding the same bike every day, to ride it at the weekend for pleasure isn't what you really want to do. So I thought, I'll build a cafe racer. So I set about building myself a custom bike. Which actually ended up being in the Bike Shed show in London, which I was privileged to be in. I produced an absolutely beautiful cafe racer, which if you look on my YouTube channel, you'll see the build on there, but that's another story.
Yeah, well, we can share all our socials in a bit.
So, I mean, up at that point, I hadn't had a bike for 15 odd years. I had a little classic motorbike as well. But then when I bought the KTM, that was the first bike, I suppose, that I'd really owned and ridden since the early 2000s, because I'd just been riding the FJR and whatever other bikes Yamaha would lend us. That was very different to what I'd been riding before. It was my first, even though I've been off-road, it was my first proper venturing into green laning and adventure bike riding.
And you got a taste for that, did you? You thought, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, I bought it to ride to Morocco with a mate of mine who was running a bike tour company, and that was the original plan, was to do a bit of the tear, a bit of green laning at weekends that gives me something different to enjoy, and the chance to go and spend a month riding around Morocco. And then it just evolved into, I got addicted to it, you know, riding up to the top of a mountain in Wales and able to see things that, unless you walk there or cycle there, you were never going to get to.
Yeah.
And also riding along at 30 mile an hour down a dirt track felt like 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, that's it.
So all of a sudden, like many middle-aged men, I'd found a new passion for riding. So I could ride all week long, but come the weekend, I was excited to go and ride again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned Morocco. One of my guests a few weeks ago, I'll put a link to it for people. Really, really interesting. He, in 1974, and his mate rode to Morocco on two old Yamaha bikes, which were old then, that they'd built up literally from scrap, and had an adventure at 20 years old. And then last year, 50 years later, they bought two bikes identical the same year, and did the same journey 50 years later on two Yamaha bikes, which was amazing. And then found the same campsite that they stayed in when they were 20 years old. Now they're 70 years old. So when you said that, it just reminded me how wonderful it was for that guy. Imagine 70 years old going back to somewhere when you were 20 doing the same journey with the same guy on the same bikes. So, yeah, I do understand that feeling of middle-aged people thinking, right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But I think what's also happened now in the bike world is, I remember 80s, 90s, and even 2000s, it was sports bike, sports bike, sports bike. Everyone had sports bike. You could ride like absolute donkeys and not really get into too much trouble unless you were unlucky. And that started to change. And also the younger riders, like when we started at 16, 17, aren't coming into it because it's so expensive. And this new licensing system
so complicated,
costs them so much money just to get a full bike license.
Yeah.
And then I think if they even, I'm not sure 100% how it works, but if they pass their test at, I don't know, 18, 19, they have to redo it again at 21 or something.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure.
Same one at 23 times.
So it's like, well, why am I going to do that? I can go and buy a car and just drive that and wait until I'm in my 20s. So that young generation is not coming into bikes like when we did.
You're right.
So most riders now are middle-aged men. Unfortunately, I hate that term, but I'm a middle-aged man now. I'm 52. And we have the money to be able to do it. Oh, it's moisturiser.
Oh, is that moisturiser? Yeah.
Crafty comb over. So the demographic has changed.
Yeah.
And which is a shame because it's killing off what we had. So yeah, they're all middle-aged. They've got a bit more money, but as you call it, the crutch rockets, we can't ride them anymore. Our backs, our wrists, our this, our that, and you can't ride like we used to ride. Well, I'm all right there, thankfully.
Like your cafe racer, mate. I might be able to do 100 yards, and I'd be like.
So yeah, I think that's why it's mainly middle-aged men. Yes, there are ladies who are into bikes as well, but again, that's quite a small niche market. But yeah, most people are more mature riders now. And that's they're finding this, and I think the internet has been a massive thing for this, is opening their eyes to what else is available, and that's why you don't see the sports bikes like you used to. It's adventure bikes everywhere.
It is, yeah. I mentioned when we were talking earlier before we started this podcast about the fact that this is not monetized. I do this because I love it, but it also not just because I think people find it interesting, but I like the fact that lots of female riders have contacted me as well to say, would you be happy to, you think your listeners would be interested to hear about my adventure? And I'm like, absolutely. Because for the same reasons as we are getting older, it does tend to be older female riders as well. They see things like this and think, wow, that guy's done that. He's 52 and he's done all that. And now he's doing this. I could do that. And they do. And, it's becoming, although it's only, I think, I'm not really sure of the figures, but I know I can only give you the figures for my channel. And there won't be the exact ones. But the last time I looked, it was something like 14% female.
So when I started riding, 1988 it was, and when we got into these groups of bikers and we would go to bike rallies and camping events, there was loads of women who rode bikes, and I'm still friends with all of those women now. They're all, we've all been around together for 30 odd years. Yeah. And I never see them as women. I see them as who they are, and that's it.
Absolutely.
It's a real shame that there has to be put this lady bikers, male bikers, this, but we're all the same. We're all human beings. We do have a same passion.
Exactly.
So as far as I'm concerned, you're just another rider, male or female.
No, I agree.
Actually saying that, when I worked at the race school, I preferred teaching women. And that simple fact is women listen without egos, and they took on board what you said, and they were able to actually implement those things you say, and their improvement was, I would say, steeper than the men's, because they didn't have that ego in the way. And I actually preferred teaching them, because some of the guys would come along and they were like, oh, yes, and then we go out on track and they would, because actually they're not as good as they think they are. Whereas the women came along and they just learned and they grew like that. Don't get me wrong, the men grew as well.
Of course,
but the women grew in a different way.
Yeah.
So I prefer to teach women. Plus, I didn't have to ride as hard then. I should be careful what I say, because
I'm going to say, yeah,
very fast women.
I can imagine.
Yeah,
well,
very fast.
I can imagine that they are. I'm really genuinely enthused by the fact that so many women have asked to come on here.
Yeah, it's good.
Because to me, I don't want, just for the, not wanting to sort of say the same as you, but to paraphrase a little bit, I don't want it to be a men's thing. We are adults, and we have decided that for whatever reason, back in your day in 1988, my day in 1980, because I'm 8 years older than you, so that says how we were 16. We got involved with bikes, and for whatever reason, we caught that bug. And you do catch a bug, like you talked about it being like a drug. It literally is. I used to, and I still do it now. I've got some bikes in that garage now, and I'm not riding it right now, but I know I'll go out there and I'll just have a look at it.
Yeah.
I honestly go and look at it and think, and I can smell it, and I think, I get it out and polish it, just give it a bit of a clean. I was looking at your Facebook page earlier, and I know you've had an electrical issue with your bike, which I'm sure you'll tell us about. And you said, I laughed out loud because you said, and you put a video on there, or a picture, while I'm waiting for these parts to be fixed, I may as well give it a clean. And you got the tank off and the seat off, and you were cleaning it. I thought, oh my God, he's like me.
Well, to be fair, there's 7 months of dirt from the Dempster Highway right up to Alaska through the Moab Desert.
Really
it's minging, and I have cleaned it a few times.
Yeah.
What I really need to do is pull the whole bike up. You say that, cleaning it. I said to my ex-girlfriend, so I'm just going to go and clean my bike. And she came out and there was an engine on the floor, bits of bike everywhere. And she said, you said you were cleaning it. I went, well, I couldn't get to some parts, so I just thought I'd strip the whole bike. But yeah, it is a case of it's filthy. It's proper filthy.
But there's that you wouldn't do with a car. Or if you just used a bike as transport, you wouldn't. We're not using a bike for transport, are we?
It's a way of life.
It's much more than that. So whatever gender you are, and you've got that passion, and you want to tell that story, then I want to hear it, and I love it.
100%.
Fantastic. So you have got then quite a bit of experience before you started this. Yeah, a little bit.
I can wobble round.
Because I thought, some people, it's the first big ride. And before that, I think, who was it? It won't be fair, but somebody was telling me offline, actually, well, online, but not recorded, that they took the test specifically to come and do their adventure. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. But obviously, their anticipation of what they were going to face was different to yours. You got some idea about what you're going to face, even if not the specifics.
See, there's two types of traveller. There's a motorcycle traveller, which is what I am, or motorcycle travel, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And someone who travels but has decided to use a motorcycle as their mode of transport through the landscape.
Interesting.
And it just happens to be good. They've then gone and done their test to do it. So you both travel in the same way.
Yeah.
Where you've come from is a different way, but you both choose the motorcycle to travel through the landscape. And traveling through the landscape is genuinely what you do. And seeing it evolve and change is amazing.
No, I agree. I always say, I don't think there's probably been a podcast where I haven't said that for me, the adventure is riding the bike.
Yeah.
If anything, well, what do you plan to do? I plan to ride my bike. That's, I smile for no reason when I'm riding my bike. It makes me smile.
Yeah. It's funny. I've had exactly a comment about this week by the person who's thankfully letting me stay here while my bike's waiting for bits. She said, you travel quite differently to me. I get somewhere and I want to wander around all the towns and visit all the sites and this and that. She said, but for you guys, you seem to be more about the ride. And it's like, yeah, I do like to see the stuff, but it is the ride. It's how I'm getting there. that is where I get my thrill more, is from being on the bike.
Yeah. Yeah. If I come off a dual carriageway or busy, a bit like coming out of North London, that feeling when you just get out of North London, the traffic starts to thin out, and you look around and think, oh, and you just, yeah. And everyone else is, like in the cars, and you're just like, I'm all right now. And that feeling, that big smile that comes on your face as you head up the M1 is like, or get like past Hatfield on the M25. It's like, I'm all right now. Thank you. And even back home, you can have that smile because you're traveling that way. So what more
totally
to be doing the adventure you're doing?
I could have had a week off work over the Christmas break, for example, and not ridden my bike, or I'd been snowboarding or something like that. And that first day I'd get back on the bike, it could be cold, it could be wet, and I still got that, I love this. Don't get me wrong, there's times I'd always say I hate this.
We've all done that,
It once it's in you, it's in you. You know, and you, unless you know it, you can't explain it to someone.
No, that's right.
You just have that feeling.
Yeah, my dad was a biker, and I guess that's where I got it from. I guess as a kid, when he was fixing a bike and he had an engine outside because we had no shed, and he had it under a cover, and we lived in very basic house, and in the back garden he'd have the bike out, the engine off, and he'd be blowing the carburetor jets through with a foot pump and just doing this, and then saying to me, just put your finger on here, and kicking the bike over and giving me a massive shock. I'd be like, ah! And he'd be like, laughing his head off, with his old like Triumph Thunderbird.
You couldn't do that nowadays. You'd get in trouble for that.
Imagine, they'd be like traumatized, wouldn't they? I've had to have counselling because of trauma. But that is, it's something that's in the blood, and it was in his blood, and it's in mine, and it's in yours, and many people.
Yeah, see, no one in my family was into bikes. My granddad had one when he was in India. My brother had one for a year for transport when he was 16, then got a car.
Right.
So it wasn't like I came from a biking family.
Oh, no.
I just, so I got one for a year for transport, and that was it. Yeah, just hooked.
Well, we're an hour into the podcast, and we've just got, would you believe, an hour since we started chatting. And I just wanted to know a little bit about this journey. You have shipped it from the UK. When you say ship, I guess you mean ship and not air freight.
No, it was air freighted.
So it was air freight. Where did you ship it to?
So I shipped the bike from Heathrow to Toronto. I jumped on a plane as well. So the bike was actually 2 hours behind me on a different aircraft. I was on a BA flight and it was on an Air Canada flight.
Yeah.
So it literally landed 2 hours after I did. The next day, I then went to the Air Canada warehouse to get it released and customs. But that was a long day. That took 10 hours.
I was just about to say, did that go as planned?
Not really, no. So when I got there, the computer system was down, so they couldn't log anything. Eventually, when they did get the computer system up and running, we persuaded them to unload the pallets and get ours down. Once we got the paperwork for them, I had to then go to customs, which was in a different building. Spent 3 hours there waiting for them to go and check the VIN number, which I didn't know how they were going to check because mine's pretty much covered up, but eventually got the paperwork. Then by the time I got back to the bike, it was still in its crate, so I hadn't even looked at a VIN number. And then unpacked my bike and left there. It was, a 10-hour process. And that was an English-speaking country. I would hate to think what it's going to be like when I shipped to Colombia. So, that was the 27th of May, and got the bike out on the 28th of May, 2024.
And did you have to take it out of the crate yourself? Did you have to dismantle?
Yeah, so I used a company called Motor Freight down in Heathrow, and it gets put on a wooden pallet, and then they build a very loose frame around it, and then it's cardboard, and then it's all strapped down. All my luggage was in with the crate. So I basically got it off the pallet, loaded my luggage on, and then, rode back to where I was hoteling it in Toronto itself.
Right. And you just found your feet and then started your journey, did you?
Yes and no. It took a bit of time. So I actually started the journey. The journey was meant to be a solo journey, and I met this guy called Charlie at a little festival, and we were both talking. And it turned out he was looking at doing a similar thing to me. So he kind of said, "Can I jump on the back of this?" And I was like, "Don't know if I really want to do that, but well, let's do the first week or so together." So he had already arrived in Toronto. We met up, set off together. And then after a couple of weeks, we went separate ways because he had other plans. And it was over that next 3 or 4 weeks from really leaving Toronto to find your rhythm, find how you find food, find water, find places to stay, because every day is different. You never know what's ahead of you. I suppose a good month to 6 weeks before I kind of got my rhythm and how I wanted to do things. And I suppose,
well, I've just wondered, some people do this differently. Some people pre-plan the first few days, booking ahead using booking.com, and other people just ad hoc drop in places. How did you do that?
so the first 2 nights was in a hotel near the airport, because getting the bikes out of the customers was going to be easier. Then the next 3 nights, I think it was, I had a hostel actually in Toronto itself. So we spent a few days wandering around Toronto, getting over my jet lag. And then when we set off from there, each day was see where we're at, see where we're at about a certain time, and then start finding somewhere to stay. Depending on where we were in the country, sometimes that can be quite easy, and other times it can be quite difficult. You can, looking for campsites and stuff going across the US was not as easy as I thought. Sometimes I was doing 50, 60, 70 miles between campsites just because trying to find somewhere to stay on the rough direction I was going.
Yeah, I've experienced that actually.
Yeah, and then sometimes you have to go, I need a hotel. You have to do what you've got to do. But if you plan stuff, it never goes to plan. True. Things get in the way, and you then have to change your plans. So you've got to be flexible.
Yeah.
So I have had a couple of deadlines where I've had to be somewhere, but generally I just see what happens.
Right.
See where I'm at 2 o'clock. See what's going on. And also, depending when it's going to get dark, depends on how early you start looking.
Yeah. I mentioned about the campsite. I remember using a map again, no sat nav. I think 2001, going out of Quebec into New York State, and thinking, and on the map there's a campsite down here, and it looked about an inch away. That's not far.
800 miles.
Yeah, well, it weren't quite that, but I thought that's not far. So I went across the border, and then literally just had to visually, because there's no turn left now if you haven't got a sat nav. So I'm looking for the sat, and I saw this sign burnt into a wooden thing, so it can't, not painted, but burnt in, and it said campsite next left. So I thought, oh, brilliant. And I'd done about well over 100 miles, and I expected it. I was looking for it 10 miles every 2 miles after 10 miles.
The thing is, when you're in the UK and you see this much, you think it's half an hour. Yeah. But in North America, that much is hundreds of miles. And when we talk about, if we talk about going a 100-mile journey, that's a long way. Whereas in North America, 100 miles is just a little trip down the road.
Exactly.
When we was in this one little town, the guy said, "Oh yeah, the supermarket, it's on the edge of town, just a few miles away." Started riding. We got 2 or 3 miles up road. We're going to have a look on a map now. It was it was 15 miles.
Yeah. And
for us, that's another town. But here, it was definitely town.
Yeah, you're ready for Peterborough.
Exactly. It's the distances are vast here. And when people say, "Oh yeah, I went there. Yeah, it took me 2.5 days to get there," that's when you realise that this place is vast. Absolutely really vast.
Is. And even there, when I turned left into that campsite, I rode about 10 miles down a fire track in this forest, thinking, someone's taking the piss. Someone's moved that sign and put it here. It isn't here. So I'm looking every little gap, thinking, could it be down here, a little track where you could just get a quad or something? And I'm like, so I did another, and I was just telling someone the other day, actually, I did 15 miles, and I thought, right, another mile or two, and I'm turning round. At what point do you get that deep in that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I thought, anyway, whatever it was that drove me, I got to 15 miles, and I thought, you know, that like, I've come so far now. One more mile, one more mile, one more mile. 26 miles down this track. It opens up into like a semicircle with those benches, you know, those like V-shaped benches, a fire pit and a little thing for your tent. And I was like, 26 miles. I mean, that's like insane. In the UK, that, like you said, you've gone from one city to another.
Yeah, if we talk about traveling for half an hour, we're like, oh, it's so far.
It's just down a track.
Exactly.
So you took it, you've done each day. Have you ever found yourself not able to find anywhere on this journey yet?
A couple of times. Yeah, a couple of times I've had, I need somewhere to stay now. So I was down in, coming through towards Arizona, I was, and there's this lake called, I don't know, I can't remember the name of it, and the wind was howling off it. It was 50, 60 mile an hour winds, and the couple of so-called campsites along the side of the road were exposed. They were desert, it was sand, there was nowhere to put a tent up. And obviously with the internet, I was able to search stuff, and eventually I found another town, I don't know, probably 40 miles away, and ended up using newsbooking.com to get one. I had another one. I was coming up the Continental Divide through Wyoming from Colorado. And it was one of those ones, it was getting late. Again, it was high winds, nowhere to put up a tent. And again, I had to get a last minute hotel. I need a hotel. I don't have a choice now. So there's been a few times I've had to spank out more money than I wanted to, but you get to that point of, I need somewhere to sleep. You know, the primal things that we need is food, shelter, warmth, and sometimes you've got to put a hotel. Is what it is.
It's some, and it bites into your budget that you didn't anticipate, doesn't it? You know.
Yeah, massively.
And they've gone up. Things have gone up a lot. I remember not that long ago, and I'm talking 2018. You could still pick up these like roadside, you know, where those motels that like serial killers live in.
Yeah,
you know,
I've seen a couple of those.
Yeah, you know, you definitely gonna get murdered in there type thing. You put your bike inside with you. Just get it through the door to the end of the bed if you can. Those type of places.
Yeah, there's been a few of those. You could still
get them for like $35. No chance. No chance.
$85, $90 now.
Yeah.
And because of the exchange rate, I think what am I getting? $1.24 to the pound. It's painful. You know, North America is so expensive for us coming from the UK.
It is. Food, eating out, everything's expensive.
Oh, it's hurt. Other than fuel, it's hurt. North America.
It is. The first time I ever went to the States was in, I think, 1993. Young lad, probably late 20s, and they were $2 to the pound. Might have been 91, 92, and it was like we were rich. I remember like going in and buying these Levi jeans for like $8, and it was £4. And then back home there was still the 20 odd quid, and I was like, to buy another suitcase to come home, you know, unbelievable.
Yeah, when I restored my my Mustang back in, what was that, 2007, 2008, I think the exchange rate was about 1.9. And I think when I finished restoring it a year later, it was down to about 1.5. And, you know, even then I was getting pretty good, but now, it's just, it hurts.
It does. Yeah. Very painful. So it's very, as I say, it's a bit of an impact if you're unable to find somewhere to camp, and, you know, you've got 2 or 3 days budget going on a night in all fairness. It might be 6 or 7 hours just to get some kip.
Yeah, it's been fine. Well, it's not been fine. It's been better when I've been traveling with other people, because we're splitting the cost of a hotel. So all of a sudden it becomes more affordable.
Yeah.
But when you're on your own, hotels, you know, I had a few that I had to do that just, it's painful. It is what it is. But when you're trying to live on a budget of a minimum amount a day or maximum amount a day, that hotel, as you say, it could be 3 or 4 days budget gone on one night.
Yeah, definitely. What would you say on this journey has been the most challenging part of it, other than flying it out and having to pay all that money to fly it over the Atlantic and then taking 10 hours to get it out? From then on, what's been either the physical, mental, emotional, what's been the biggest challenge for you, if you'd like to tell us?
It's been a mixture of a few things. For me, the physical, because I have a back injury that I've been plagued with for the last 6 odd years.
Okay.
I slipped a couple of discs. I got degeneration of 2 lower discs, which was not good. And then I slipped those discs. So I suffer from sciatica, not as bad as it was 3 years ago. For the first 3.5 years, I was in excruciating pain, whereas now I'm in a lot better position. So I manage it. So there's days that I have good and bad days, and I did have a flare up when I was down in Oregon, and I was in a lot of pain for about 5 weeks. The other challenges have been finding food, fuel, water, especially when you're in quite remote places. When you get up into Canada and that, and the distances, as I said, they're vast.
Yeah.
And those have been challenges. But actually been sitting down the last few days doing my editing, and I've been looking back at the Canada stuff, and I realized how amazing it was to be so remote, so far away from people. But those are challenges. Thankfully, touch wood, until this particular point, parts haven't really been a problem. But right now, waiting for my bike parts to be sorted is a challenge, because I've all of a sudden become static with no way of moving, no transport. So for me, I think that's another challenge that I'm having to deal with, because I've always been so independent. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is finding somewhere to stay each night. Really, that's somewhere where you're safe, because all you got is a zip on your tent.
Yeah.
Whereas, at least if you're in a car or something, you can lock a door. But once you set up your tent, that's it. You are vulnerable. So finding safe places to wild camp is, I think those have probably been the biggest challenges. Is put somewhere to put your head down at night, where you feel safe.
Yeah. It's interesting. Because I guess that's one of the biggest challenges we all face when you're on a bike. You're vulnerable, and I guess another way to look at the vulnerability element of being on a bike is that it's a very positive thing as well when it comes to how people interact with you.
Oh, completely.
You are vulnerable, aren't you?
Yeah. If you're in a car or a van or something, you've got a barrier between you and other people. With the bike, you're accessible. You're almost seen as a nomadic traveller, like on a horse or something like that.
Yes.
So people want to approach you. They want to talk to you. They're interested, especially when they see the foreign number plate. They've never seen them. They ask. So there's so many aspects of that vulnerability. Gives you something that you don't get with a motor vehicle, with a car, which is exciting and liberating, and you feel like a bit like a celebrity for a while, because everybody wants to know about you and help you. So definitely that vulnerability goes both ways.
Definitely. I think there's it's just because not just because you're on a bike, but because you're solo as well. I think when you're in a group of people, like when I've ridden, we talked earlier about the British motorcycling group, and lots of group rides. You might have, I think at one point we had 42 bikes on a ride. It's
wow.
It's a lot of people to be responsible for, and I wouldn't recommend it to do it very often. It was a get together that we did. But the point is, I think the point I'm making is, when you are one of a lot of bikers, you're seen as a threat as opposed to not. So when you pull into a cafe or services, people are locking the doors. You can see them literally going, and people inside going, just checking the car's locked. Everybody's like, you're a risk. But when you're on your own, the person giving you fuel, or the person serving you or taking your money off you, is like, oh wow, where have you come from? You know, and they want to talk to you, like you say.
Yeah.
It changes those dynamics massively, and I think, and I like that part of it. I guess most people, it is part of that experience. Another thing I wanted to ask you is, have you come across any other British riders whilst you've been on your journeys?
A couple. So there's obviously the guy I'm now traveling with again, Charlie, who I started the journey with, and then we went separate, then we rejoined, and then we went separate for another couple of months, and then we're back together. And we were in Cody near Yellowstone, and we met a British guy who was on his way down to South America. And there's been a few. There was one guy I met in California. We were staying at a bunker biker, which is a bit like a couch surfing, but it's for bikers. It's called bunker biker. We both happened to be staying there on the same night. He was an English guy on a US bike he bought. The other people, English-wise, have all been people I'm corresponding with that I've not actually bumped into yet. But we're here. We're just kind of doing that at the moment. So
Yeah.
answer to the question is yes, but not as many as I think I'll meet as I go further into Central America, as we kind of get funneled into that point at Panama.
Right, brilliant. So, you've been talking about that vulnerability while you're riding. I just wondered, what has been your route up to now since you left Toronto? What have you done? Where have you been? And tell us about that.
So, across the border into the US at Niagara Falls, and I picked up a BDR. A BDR is called a backcountry discovery route, and it's a route put together that you can download on a GPX file, put it onto your GPS and follow it. So I took the Mid-Atlantic BDR down through the Appalachian Mountains from Pennsylvania, took me down through to Virginia, down to North Tennessee, kind of that way, stopped at Gettysburg on the way. And that's the point that myself and Charlie went separate ways. I then continued on down to Mississippi, did the Tail of the Dragon, went to Wheels Through Time, which is an amazing. It started out as a motorcycle museum, but there are a few cars in there, but generally it's all motorcycles. It was a private collection.
Oh, wow.
That has now become a massive museum from this guy who had his car dealership. I won't go too much into it.
Yeah.
It'll give you more information, but it was an incredible day. And then from there, I then went across to Hot Springs, spent a couple of days there before I then headed north towards Tulsa, into Arkansas. And then I did the vast prairies of Oklahoma. I did 600 odd miles straight on flat terrain across Oklahoma, sort of dipping in and out of Kansas, which brought me across to a place called Trinidad, just south of Denver in Colorado. My plan then was to continue on the Trans-America Trail, because that's what I was riding at that point, across to the East Coast. But I then had to change direction because I had GPS issues, and I had a new unit getting sent to me in Trinidad, but then USPS completely screwed that up, and then they sent it back to Maryland. And then I discussed with the guy about it. He said, well, I'm going to Montana for my holiday. I'll bring it there. So I basically changed direction by 1,000 miles and headed north. So I rode part of the Continental Divide up towards Yellowstone. And that's where I re-met up again with Charlie. So for the last 2 weeks or so, we'd been thousands of miles apart, and then our paths crossed. So we joined up.
Wow.
From there, we went up through Montana and took the road to the sun out of the top of the Glacier National Park and went into Canada. Again, big, flat, open plains up to Calgary. Until you've seen these flat lands, you don't realize how big the sky is. When I say the sky is big, it is vast. And these flat plains where you're just straight, no turns for 100, 200 miles is just the strangest feeling. And then from the Calgary, we went across to Banff, a quick stop at the Horizons Unlimited meeting, where we met up with a couple of Germans who were traveling. We'd agreed to do the Dempster with those guys. So then myself and Charlie went back towards Lake Louise, and then we rode up through the Rocky Mountains to Jasper, which was a bizarre feeling because there was forest fires, and we were traveling through the smoke for forest fires for about 50 odd kilometers before we got to Jasper. Stopped in Jasper, did some resupply for food and water and stuff like that. But because the smoke was still in the air, we decided we didn't want to hang around. We wanted to find somewhere clear to be able to camp, which little did we know was the right decision, because the next day the forest fire changed direction and it tore through Jasper. So we were actually lucky that we made that decision to push on. So we pushed on towards Dawson City, all the way up to Watson Lake, where the famous signpost forest is, where there's some 100,000 signs that have been put up over the last 60 odd years, 70 years, no, 80 years since World War II. And from there, we were then heading towards the Dempster, which starts up by Dawson City. The other place was Dawson Creek. But from there, we decided to get off the Alaska Highway because it's mainly tarmac. We wanted more dirt stuff. So we took this road called the Robert Campbell Highway. When I say a highway, it's just a dirt road for 500 or 600 kilometers. We rode that to a place called Ross River, which was a fuel stop, which was, I think, 380 kilometers. And then from there, we took a road called the South Canal Road, which is just the most sublime dirt road that weaves through the hills and the mountains and through beautiful lakes. There's nobody. You're desolate. At the point when we got to the center of it, the nearest civilization was 120 miles each way. So it's like being at Birmingham and your nearest civilization is London. And that's kind of where we were on that. That's how remote it was. And from there, we then headed up to a place called Whitehorse, where we got tyres and other bits sorted. And from then, we then headed up to pick up the Dempster Highway. And again, the Dempster Highway is not a highway as we think. It is a gravel road that takes you all the way from the Dempster Highway to Tuktoyaktuk, which is right at the top of the Arctic Ocean, which is the furthest you can ride. And that's the top of Northern Territory, which was just the most unbelievable 5 or 6 days. Met a guy and a girl who did it on a Goldwing on road tyres. So there's us all on our adventure bikes, and he's on a Goldwing.
Yeah.
We met Natalie, who had a push bike on the back with cyclists on it. It was incredible. And then we were meant to do that with the German couple, but that didn't happen because they were waiting for parts. So from there, we then headed back to Dawson. I then bumped into an English guy who I met in the UK 4 years before, who happened to be coming into Dawson City at the same time as me, which was bizarre.
Yeah.
I met him in Surrey, hadn't seen him for 4 years. He saw my social media. He says, I'm coming into Dawson at the moment as well.
No way.
That was really bizarre. Then we left Dawson, and then the couple that I'd seen on the Dempster, on the Goldwing and the little Kawasaki sport bike. Now, they weren't a couple; they just joined up on the Dempster.
Oh, I see.
I bumped into them with Charlie as we entered Alaska. So we'd come out for the top of the world highway into Alaska, and there they were. So we spent the next few days traveling with those guys. And when you see them riding dirt and gravel roads on a Goldwing and this sports bike on road tires, it was incredible. So there's no excuse. Any bike is an adventure bike. From there, we went out to Anchorage, took a ferry back to Valdez. Then we rebumped into the German couple as they came into Tok in Alaska, which would then see the next, I think, 6 weeks we traveled with those guys. We'd gone from 2 to 4 to 3, now to a group of 5, then back to a group of 4. So we've got this little posse now riding all the dirt roads in Canada, visiting glaciers, seeing grizzly bears feeding on salmon, seeing moose, seeing bald eagles. We've seen snakes, snapper turtles. We've seen all sorts of wildlife. It's just been, I even saw a bobcat, and I think I saw a mountain lion, but I couldn't be 100% sure. So I've kind of seen all sorts on this journey. It's just been the most incredible. And then we took the ferry from Prince Rupert to Port Hardy on Vancouver Island. then rode down through Vancouver Island, took the ferry across to Vancouver, stopped there for a couple of weeks where I was sick for 4 days. Also, that's where I put a clutch in my bike. From there, headed across and crossed the border into the US at Washington State. From there, we followed some of the BDRs down through Washington State to the Moscow Moto headquarters at White Salmon. So I then met the Moscow Moto crew and stayed at the Bates Motel, which is their campground. And at that point, the four of us all went separate ways. So Sven and Ellen, the German couple, they headed off down towards Salt Lake City.
Right.
Charlie had a broken bike, so he was waiting for some parts. And I headed towards Portland in Oregon. And then I was now solo. I headed down to a friend of mine on the bottom Oregon, who I've known through the World War II Jeeps for 20 odd years, but I've never visited him. So I went to see him.
Oh, wow.
And then from there, I headed across to the Bonneville Salt Flats. And that's also where I had my first breakdown. The gear shift spring broke.
Yeah.
So I was there anyway, but I had to wait for a $5 part to come. So I fixed that while I was at his place. Then I headed across towards the Bonneville Salt Flats and then to Salt Lake City. And it just happened to be that the night I came in Salt Lake City, the Germans were going to be leaving the next morning. So we rejoined. So I'm now back with the German couple. From there, we headed to Utah, down to Moab, which was just the most sublime journey through desert, through red rock. To see it rather than not a picture was just the most amazing, sublime thing. I rode the Schaefer Trail, which is a trail that weaves its way down a cliff, literally into the bottom of a canyon. From there, headed towards there's several national parks that we did there, then headed towards Vegas, spent a couple of days in Vegas, and then was invited to the Moscow Moto Dusty Lizards event in Death Valley. So I headed to Death Valley, few days camping there, and a few ride outs into the desert. We'd gone out with a group. I think there was 9 of us or 10 of us in the group. A couple of guys had some big falls in the washouts. We had to get 2 guys actually, to be fair, rescued. One had broken his collarbone and a few ribs. We're in the desert, it's 35, 40 degrees. Had to get their bikes loaded onto a flatbed, then taken off to hospital, which thankfully wasn't me, because normally it's me on my arse, but it was these guys. From there, I then headed towards Lake Mono, where there's an old ghost town called Bodie, an old gold rush town, which was abandoned in the 70s. Amazing place. From there, I then headed off solo again to California to meet up with some more Jeep friends and spent the next 5 days rock crawling in World War II Jeeps. Then back to San Francisco, down to LA, out to Arizona, and then into Mexico at Tecate, where I rejoined up with Charlie in Arizona. We'd been separate for about 2 months at that point. And then we've been traveling down through Baja, spent a bit of time there, bit of R&R, and then took the ferry across to mainland Mexico at Mazatlan, and then went down to Tequila, Mexico City, where I'm now waiting with a broken bike again. The stator has burnt out, and I'm just waiting for it to be rewound.
Wow.
So that's condensed.
Well, yeah, but you know what? You hardly took breath there. And listening to you, I mean, honestly, it's fascinating, because that's how. I mean, I don't know if I had
23,000 miles.
23,000 miles.
Yes.
I know a lot of people, and I'm sure you do, who have never ridden 23,000 miles in their whole biking career.
Yeah. That's kind of half a year's riding for me anyway. I used to do 35 to 40,000 miles a year. The first 5 months was intense. There was so much distance to cover in North America because of chasing the seasons. I had to get to the Arctic Ocean before autumn set in to be able to then get down to Mexico before the winter was chasing me down the country. So the first part was always going to be about big miles. And the little 690, bless her, even though she's broken twice, she's been good. Big dirt bike.
Good. And she's proven that KTM reputation that sometimes people have is not true.
KTM, keep throwing money. I maintain her myself. I service her myself. I carry service items with me, shims, etc., etc. I do the work myself, and touch wood, stay on top of it, use it, don't abuse it, and I'll look after you. But yeah, she's done 42,000 miles now. And for a KTM, a lot of people, they get scared at a few thousand. So yeah, it just shows you they are good bikes.
They are, yeah. And they're designed for what you're doing with it.
Yes.
To be honest.
Mine is heavily modified, but they are good out of the box.
Yeah, yeah. What type of modifications have you done to it?
Oh, visually, put luggage racks on it. I've put long range fuel tanks on it and a rally tower. The tower makes a massive difference for your wind protection. The fuel range on the 690, you get 12 litres, which is basically the subframe, which gives you about 150 to 170 miles. It's not much. So I've put Rally Raid auxiliary rear tank, which is 4.5 litres, and their rally tanks on the front, which gives me another 9. So give or take a bit, I've got 26 litres of fuel, which gives me, if I'm being conservative on the throttle, I get about 580 kilometres, which is 350 miles on a tank. On it's 4 fuel tanks that I've got. So I don't have to carry fuel bladders. If I'm getting a bit fruity, I get about 540 kilometers, which is about 320 miles.
Not bad then.
Yeah, there's been a few points that I've needed that. I've pushed on for 500 kilometers without fuel. So it's been really good. And then the other main thing, is suspension. With the type of riding I'm doing, and especially with luggage, you have to uprate the suspension. So I've had K-Tech replace my fork internals, and I've got a tractive rear shock built for me and my luggage, which has transformed the bike. Means it's very tall, but it means it 20 odd thousand miles in, and I've had no issues.
Are you quite tall, Demon?
I'm 5'11". I've got a 32 inside leg, so I've got a long inside leg, but I'm still on tiptoes on it. Yeah.
But but you need it, as you say. I think to do it stock would be a different story.
Stock was no good. I had a stock shock modified, but the second I put luggage on it, just really, and there was no damping. It would bounce around like a pogo stick. So I did a week on the Tet in France before I left back in October, and that just showed to me, with even then I think I only had about 15 kilos of luggage. It just wasn't up to the hard off-road stuff. I had to uprate it because I knew I was going to be carrying more. And so Martin at Torque Racing got a shock built for me in record time. I think it was 5 days, sent over from Holland for me. And it's night and day. The amount of luggage I'm carrying and the type of off-road I've been doing, it was a necessity.
Yeah, and it's not just the luggage and the terrain. I mean, with 27 litres of fuel, you've got 20 odd kilograms extra weight there.
Yeah, 26 kilos of fuel.
Yeah, that's a lot of weight.
Yeah,
but not all the time. But it's got to be variable. So you've got to.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the KTM out the box is pretty light anyway. I think it's 141 kilos. Right. With the mods I've done, it's probably weighing in at about 155-ish, I suppose, all in. Then you've got, your 26 kilos of fuel, plus I'm carrying probably 35 kilos of luggage.
Right.
So yeah, I'm pushing 200 kilos, and then I got my fat ass on it as well. So yeah, it's anybody who's going to do any serious travel, even on the road, you need to sort your suspension out.
Well, when I'm sat here listening to your journey, then I would say any self-respecting biker would be hard-pressed not to listen to you and think, wow, that's amazing. Honestly, I mean, it's just like most people, whether they've done this type of riding before, or they aspire to, or they like to read about it and hear about it and wish they had, back in the day, or would like to, I don't know. I think it'd be difficult not to be impressed by what you've done. You know.
It's a hard one because I don't want people to look at me and be impressed by it. Everybody's on their journey for a different reason.
Yes,
and
of course.
my journey isn't just about me exploring and seeing the world. My journey is, who am I now in my 50s? I'm not that 25-year-old or that 30-year-old or that 35-year-old, racer on a super bike, doing the Suzuka 8 hour. I'm not that person anymore. Who am I for this next point in my life? When I had my back injury, that basically stopped me doing pretty much most things for 4 years. I thought, is this it? Is this it for the rest of my life? I'm 46 and I can't move because I'm in so much pain. When I had more of a recovery from the back, I knew that I needed to live more of my life before I couldn't. I have one life and I don't want to just exist to pay bills. So I knew that I wanted to do more. And this is something I dabbled with. And like everybody, we all watched Ewan McGregor do the long way round. I had also watched before that Austin Vince do Mondo Enduro back in the day. And these things had always given me a taster for it. And when I went off to do the World Championship, my mate who I'd met through snowboarding was also an ex-British Championship racer as well. He was setting off on a 2-year trip around the world on his bike, and he was gone for 6.5 years. And I would watch his journey and wish that I could do something like that. The problem is we all have dreams, but many people don't chase them. And this was another dream that I had, and I wanted to chase it. So I basically quit my job, packed my life away into boxes, worked hard for 2 years to save enough money to be able to live life. So this isn't a tick box for me. This is a personal, mental, spiritual journey of figuring out who am I, what do I want for that future. And I think that's more what it's about than trying to impress, if that makes sense.
I absolutely agree. If you look at the introductory video that I do for this series of podcasts, this series 1, I talk about people who may be a guest on this podcast and how I make a joke actually about the fact that you don't have to have ridden around the world backwards with a rabbit on your head to come and tell us about it. You might have just gone to work every day on a Honda C90 through all the weather that the UK can throw at you, or the world. And the adventures that you've had, the breakdowns you've had at the side of the A1, and that might have been your adventure.
Yeah.
Your adventure, like mine, my first adventures were just as valuable as any other riding I've done. So, when I was 16, I had a KTM Comet Cross, which broke down all the time. and we used to ride, us kids, 16-year-olds, from where I live in Yorkshire. We used to ride up to Scotch Corner, which is on the A1 going up towards Scotland. And it's about 45, 50 miles. But you know what? On those FS1Es, on those AP50s, those SS50s, this KTM Comet Cross.
That's massive.
That's massive. And now I'm out of sync. But honestly, it was like around the Europe trip to us that.
Yeah.
Breaking down, I remember having my gearbox, my gear selector snap on the A1. We all had our heads on the tanks and our feet on the back of the pillion seat, trying to get 42 out of it, and trying to get behind lorries to get the wind so we could get up to 44 and 45, and insane. What an adventure for us. I remember going camping to the Peak District about 45 miles away to a place called Eyam, where the the Black Death occurred, and we camped out next to the train station there, or next to the railway lines, because it woke us up about every 30 minutes. And I remember going there, to us, that literally the adventure of a lifetime.
But as you say, everybody's venture is different. Mine just happens to be bigger than some other people's. Not everybody is in a position or even wants to do something this big.
No.
And they can live their dreams vicariously through other people's adventure. And that's where obviously social media is good. You know, I was editing a video yesterday and I needed a break from it. And I've started watching The Long Way Up.
Yeah.
I've seen it before, but I'm watching it because I'm about to do South America, and I'm watching it and some of the stuff they're doing. I'm like, they're mad, they're crazy. And I'm thinking, hold on a minute, I'm doing exactly that. Actually, they're not that crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do get what you're saying. I remember my first adventure. I was 16. I think I'd been riding for a couple of months, and myself and 3 other guys decided to ride our 50cc bikes from London to Brighton and then back again, and had a heat seize on the way and had a problem with this and a problem with that. And that was just the most epic thing I'd ever done, you know? So yeah, every adventure, even let's say a trip to the shops is an adventure.
Absolutely. The adventure is the ride, and
Yes.
your ride and what it brings to you. Certainly, just before Christmas, we talked about mental health a lot, you know, for all of us. And if I hadn't have been ill over Christmas, I would have, I intended to do a video, actually. I'm still going to do it about mental health, but, you know, how the benefits of riding a bike or driving a car, because I'm a car freak as well. But, you know, whatever it is that makes you, that gives you that freedom, that feeling,
100%.
you know, yeah. And there's a lot more to it. This is why I asked you, because about the things that might have happened to you that impacted on you emotionally, physically, or mentally. There's a lot more to it than just people riding a bike to feel good. It's what it does to you.
For me, I was at that point in my life, 46, when my back gave out, and what I didn't realize, I'd started midlife crisis, but I like to call it a midlife awakening of that realization. Like I say, I've less life left than I've had, but I was under a lot of pressure from something in the relationship. Work was changing, COVID had come, I was trying to recover from, you know, being self-employed and not earning anything for 5 months. Just all of those things were building up, and I didn't realize how much stress that I was actually under, and the realization that if I didn't change my life, it was going to kill me, because stress is a killer. But I had 10 things going on at once, and each time I thought I dealt with this issue, there was another issue, then another issue. So the moment I actually got on that aircraft and left Heathrow, all of a sudden things just went, oh, as all that pressure and stress that I was under had finally been lifted, because I had stepped away from it. Now, some people might say it was running away. Well, it's not, because at some point I will have to come back. I have to earn a living again. But I knew that I needed to make big changes for my mental state, because I was getting crushed. But I think a lot of people get there and they don't realize it, whereas I was able to understand that I know what's happening to me now, and I need to change my life and do something and live that and enjoy it for now and not for the future, because we don't know what that future is. And I think that's the problem, is we get so engulfed in mental problems that we don't even understand them.
I'm really pleased that you said that, honestly, and I'm thanks for sharing now that, you know, I understand, believe me, without going into too much detail. Not that I don't want to talk about it, but, you know, we all have that pressure that you begin to feel crushed by. And I genuinely believe that a lot of people who do their adventure, as we've discussed, whatever that is as a result of some sort of awakening, something that makes you think, I need to make a change because things have changed in my life that I'm not dealing with as well as I could. And if I don't, you just said stress is a killer. And it really is. People underestimate how much of a negative impact that can have on you. You know, we all know that being overweight or smoking or drinking excessively can kill you, but stress is believe me, that can really damage you.
Totally. And it affects you subconsciously. Other people can see around you how you're changing, but you don't see it yourself.
No.
And then one day, if you're lucky enough, you will have that light bulb moment and realize that you are different. You're changing, not necessarily in a good way.
Yeah.
And it was just a few things that people have pointed out to me that I sat back and thought, oh, okay. And I had to have a think about it. I had to reevaluate it. In fact, somebody played me this song the other day, Michael Jackson song, Man in the Mirror. Listen to the words of that. And that is what I'm now having to do, is look at that man in the mirror and change that. But only you will do it when you're ready to do it. Someone can't make you do it. But stress is dangerous.
Last night, actually, whether it's because I've been ill over Christmas and felt a bit, crap, and it brings, it makes you realize if you were ill and didn't get better, then what? It's sort of, then what? And because, recently reached my 60s, put a lot of weight on through, I guess, comfort eating habits, got to lose weight. So that's on my mind. I'm the type of person, it's no good someone saying to me, could do with losing some weight. Bollocks. You think I don't know that? I don't need anyone to tell me. I know. I just have to make the decision. I know what people are like, when it comes to addictions, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, whether it's sex, whether it's porn, whether it's food. You've got to make the decision to do it.
Yes.
No one could anyone else doing it for you.
No.
So last night, my wife working 12-hour shifts, and she came in. No, I've just lied to you. Actually, she wasn't last night. She is today. But she came into this study, and I said, I'm just writing my will. And she was like, well, wow. Why? And I said, because I haven't got one. And, a few people have said, you all right? And I'm like, yeah, why? And the fact that you just mentioned that other people noticed before you made me think, you know what? I've got responsibilities. I've got 3 kids and a wife and a house. And if I don't want to leave them in the shit.
Yeah. And the thing is, people don't want to talk about death, but it's a guarantee. We've got 2 guarantees in life, and that's death and tax. Now, you can do all you like to dodge the tax man, but you're not dodging the Grim Reaper. No. So it's something we all are going to go. Some are going to go sooner than others. Yeah. And it could be a simple accident, or it could be, health or whatever. We're all going to die.
Yeah.
But what you have to do in that time is live your life. And if you have responsibilities, yes, you need to take care of those, because when you're gone, someone's got to deal with your crap.
Yeah.
My brother's just been diagnosed with cancer, and he's not in a good space, and he hasn't dealt with his shit. And it's like, you need to do this, bruv, because we're all going to die. I've done my will, even though technically I'm fit and healthy. I could die tomorrow. We've got to sort it out.
Yeah. No, you're right. And I don't want it to become mundane, but it is a practical fact.
It's that fact of life.
It is, yeah. And so, it's interesting whenever you talk about mental health, how us men specifically, who don't talk about it enough.
Oh, totally.
All of a sudden we're talking about it. Really,
I think the problem is men feel if they show vulnerability, it's weakness. But actually, I say, if you show your vulnerabilities, that's actually a sign of strength, because you can build on that. But if you hide those vulnerabilities, they eat you up.
You're right. And I think one of the things that I think has in the past has been an issue is, one, there's the masculinity thing that it's like you mentioned, somehow it's a weakness. 2, some practical things, like silly things, like in certain jobs, if you said you're struggling, they see that as better get rid of him. Honestly, I worked in an environment where if you said you're struggling, you're a liability.
I don't like to use the word mental health because I think a lot of people see it, you're mental, you're crazy, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Because there are multiple levels of it.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
I do know that mentally I was struggling,
Yeah.
and I had to deal with that,
No, absolutely. No, I'm pleased you mentioned it, or that it became a, conversation.
It's part of the journey that I'm on, not just the journey of the physical, but also the mental and the spiritual journey that I'm traveling at the moment.
Yeah.
And I recognize that, and I'm quite happy to talk about that because it also gives you insight of who I am now and what I'm going through and what I've done. I'm 52. I've had so much experience in multiple things, but I hadn't had experience in this. So I'm learning, every day is a school day.
Yeah. So in a similar way, when I mentioned earlier that we have a house in Turkey, I had it for many years. It's right on the beach. I couldn't afford it now, but we bought it when it was cheap. I'm from Yorkshire, so I wouldn't have spent much money on it.
Right.
But that's my place sometimes, and some people find it a bit strange because my kids are grown up. So my youngest is 18, just about to join the army. My middle son is a cop; he's 31, and my oldest child, my daughter, she's 40. She'll hate me saying that, but she's very successful and running her own business, and I'm very proud of all of them. And I love my wife dearly, but sometimes I go off to Turkey for a week on my own. People say, "Oh, why do you go on your own?" Well, in my own way, for the same reason you're doing your ride now. Because when I'm sat there, not a lot of traffic, not a lot of noise, no immediate responsibilities to do this, do that at this time and that time. Nobody to answer to other than myself. Get up early and have a walk. The beach is, well, you walk out the garden onto the beach. So the beach is beautiful. It overlooks the Greek islands. And I just go and just sit there for no real reason. And I'm sure people must think, is he all right? Yeah, I'm fine. I just want to sit here and just have that time.
Yep, your own space.
Yeah, my own space and my own thoughts. And some of my friends, I make videos, and they always say, "Oh my God, it's like what's his name, Richard? What's the one who does all the talk? David Attenborough."
Yeah,
because I do these little videos, and people say, "God, you loony," and I'm like, you know what? I love doing that. I don't really care. It doesn't matter to me what you think. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me.
But that's where you could say that's where the motorcycle gives you that space. Now, I don't listen to music or podcasts when I'm riding. I'm just with myself.
Yes, yeah.
And that is the same as you taking yourself off on the beach, being on your own, or whatever people do to get their own space.
Yeah.
Being on your bike gives you your own space. You're with your own thoughts. And if you switch everything off and just be with your own thoughts, you can actually go through a lot of stuff because you have so much time to think. So maybe that's also why the bike, not just the adrenaline and everything else that comes from it, but it's the fact that you can shut the world out, you shut your visor, switch your intercom off, and just be with yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's really good to have that conversation. I appreciate.
That's another podcast, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it actually is. But you'd be surprised how many people when we talk for a couple of hours where people don't. Where that element of their life and their journey doesn't become part of it.
People hide it. It's
half the problem.
Yeah, but people just don't want to talk about it because they don't want to admit it. And it's like actually talking about it sometimes is just the first part of recognizing it and then moving on and dealing with it. And I've had lots of people when I've spoken to them about where I'm at in my life, and they're going, "Yeah, I'm there as well. That's what I feel too." And you're really inspiring me to do stuff. And actually, I get a lot from that. People saying you're an inspiration. I don't feel that. I'm just doing my thing. But I think the fact is I'm highlighting things that other people are struggling with that they haven't realized, or they've realized but not wanted to admit. Maybe that's where it comes from. I don't know. Who knows? I have some future plans, off the back of this journey and what I may do. And a few people have said, through the contacts I've made through my job and the people I deal with, many of them have said to me, you should do motivational speaking, you should get up in front of corporate businesses. They like people like you, adventurers, people who are, self-sufficient, drive for themselves, etc. And because I'm going through these changes, they want me to come back and do some motivational speaking, some talking or whatever, so maybe there's a future when I find maybe what I'm looking for in this journey, whatever it is, or however I grow, maybe there's something I can share with people. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, Demon, part of that journey has been contacting me and appearing as a guest on this podcast. And I might be able to help you in that. So, because
thank you very much.
I actually, that is what I do for a living. So,
well, maybe this is part of the journey, though, is this contact that you and I have now had.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Maybe our paths are meant to cross.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's really good that you mentioned that, because that's never come up about what I do. So in 10, 11 weeks of podcasts. So yeah, I'm glad that's come up, and hopefully we'll be able to at least have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
Because
it'd be good.
People would be very interested. So
now I'm getting excited.
Yeah. So looking ahead that far, what about, let's take a step back a bit and so I think we've got very comprehensively, and it's very excited to see that you've had this journey to where you are now. 20,000 odd miles is just incredible. You're waiting for your rewinding of your stator, I believe.
Yeah, waiting for that to be done. The guy we spoke to today is waiting for the resin, so he's saying Saturday, maybe Monday.
Okay.
So obviously by the time your podcast goes out, it's the 2nd of Jan today, so I'm looking at maybe the 6th of Jan before I get the part back.
Okay.
Once the part is fitted and I can get my bike running again, I'm going to head towards Oaxaca and then up to the Yucatan area near Cancun in Mexico on the Mexican Sea, Gulf of Mexico, I think it's called, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
From there, I'm going to head into Belize, from Belize into Guatemala into El Salvador. Now, when I get to El Salvador, I need a visa now to get into Honduras. So I'll be in El Salvador for a little bit of time while I wait for that visa process. Then it's Honduras, Costa Rica, down to Panama. So when I get to Panama, I'm then going to air freight the bike across the Darien Gap, because you can no longer do the boat service that they used to do. So the bike will be air.
Stopped it, haven't they?
Oh. Yeah, basically the Colombians changed the the immigration rules and import of vehicles.
Yeah.
So we used to have to put them on boats and then sort of sail around the Caribbean and then into Cartagena area, but it's all changed. So I have to air freight it across the Darien Gap. It is what it is. And that will ship me into Bogota. But because I'm hitting South America at the wrong time to get to Ushuaia, because at the moment they're just coming into summer, but by the time I get down to there, they'll be coming into winter.
Yeah.
So I basically have to slow my arse down as much as possible.
Yeah.
So then it's a case of meandering over the next year down to Ushuaia. Now, when I reach Ushuaia, I've got to come back to either Buenos Aires or Santiago in Chile.
Right.
If I have enough money left, because North America has absolutely smashed my budget massively, I would like to ship to Southeast Asia and then come back via Russia, Mongolia, and through the Stans along the Pamir Highway, taking in places like the Bartang Valley, bit of the Bam Road in Russia, before coming back to Europe. That's the big plan. We'll see what happens in a year's time when I get to Ushuaia. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
You mentioned a year. How long have you got? How long have you given yourself tentatively for this journey?
Until the money runs out.
Okay. So if you could earn money or enough to subsistence whilst you for fuel and food and accommodation.
If I had enough money, I would love to ship it to Australia first, do Australia, and then Southeast Asia. I'd like to think I could be gone for. Well, it's got to be a minimum of 2 years because I've got no house because I've rented it out. So I've got no home to come back to. I've got no job to come back to.
No.
Even though I've been offered my job back at any point, I don't want to go back to smashing around London. But yeah, I'd like to think I'm going to be away for at least 2 years. So that's another, what we're now, 7 months in.
Yeah.
So that's, another 15 months.
15 months, yeah. And you're trying to
17 months,
trying to beat the weather. You're trying to make sure
I'm chasing the seasons.
Yeah, which you have to do. Certainly when you're going north to south.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all right going that way around,
but also coming back. If I'm coming back from Vladivostok in Russia, going via Lake Baikal and that in Siberia on the Barren Road back to Mongolia and etc. Yeah. I've got to get that season right as well.
Yes.
I'm coming across,
so
I have even less time to get that season correct. So it is about the way the globe is turning and how, and also what land borders you can cross, what visas you might need, what carnets you need, because all of those come into account of, and also where you can and can't ship to and from. They will denote parts of what I can and can't do. I know that Dave, you had on the other week, the issues that he had with Egypt and Iraq and those places.
Yeah.
I haven't watched his stuff. I've been so busy myself, but I do know that those present different problems. Yeah. I knew that if I went to any of those countries, I couldn't go to the US for 10 years. So that's one of the reasons why I did the US first, is that way, if I do come back via, Iran or, Iraq, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about not being able to enter the US.
Yes.
So I have a rough plan, but it evolves. Yeah. It constantly changes, and you've just got to roll with it. And what will be, will be. But yeah, I'd like to think I'll be away for at least 18 months more. And if I can stretch it a bit more, if suddenly my YouTube goes mental and I have 2 million followers and have an income, then maybe it'll be even longer. Who knows?
Are you on TikTok as well?
No, I'm not on TikTok. I'm on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. It's a full-time job in itself. As you know from editing these, editing a video will take me 2 days. And I'm 3 months behind, 4 months behind on mine at the moment. It is full-time.
Yeah. The best thing I've done is I'm a bit of a gamer. I like to play games on my PC. So I've got a gaming PC, which means that I don't have to wait for any editing out. It can be so demanding on your graphics card and your processor when you're editing. It can be so slow. What used to happen with my old Dell laptop, which was I'm sorry about that.
I had one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could literally go to bed and get up in the morning. It's on 18%, and it's like killing me. Or if I'm staying somewhere and I'm editing it, then the owners of the place I'm staying at can't watch Netflix because it's taking all their data. So, like, can you please disconnect from it and buy a SIM card? Okay. So this has helped me a lot. Having a fast PC, it's of course it doesn't make my time any quicker, but my actual labor, but waiting in between is pretty quick now. So that's a good thing. Not that you can necessarily go out and spend a lot of money or build a fast PC when you're doing what you're doing. I understand.
No, I've just got a MacBook that I bought before I left. It could be better, but how much money do I spend?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. You've got to. It's got to be a balance. Edit fast, but no money to eat. Which what do you want?
Well, even editing, just thinking about how to make a story into a 15 or 20-minute video, that takes time. And if you don't have the content, you can't edit it. You can't put a story together. So sometimes I can spend half a day just trying to start one because I just don't know how to put it together. Because everything I film isn't necessarily interesting. So why do you want to see it? If I get bored looking at it, why do you want to look at it?
Well, what I will say is that I've been looking at them and I've really enjoyed them, and I think you do it really well. Honestly,
thank you.
No,
I think they're getting better.
Yeah, and they do, don't they? As you get more experienced, and some of it becomes a bit more like machine learning. You've done it before, so same with my editing of these. The first few I look now and think, I literally put it on raw and put a bit of YouTube music, which you can't even fade out. It was like start, stop, and and my intention was to be all bit of bravado and say to people who I interviewed, I just like to do it really raw footage, straight off Zoom onto YouTube. The reality was I didn't know how to edit, so that's why I did it. But I've pushed the boat out and bought some editing software, and I'm learning how to use it. And I think, I don't know what other people, I hope so, but I think the later ones are better as I start to
I think it's like anything you gain experience with, you get better.
Yeah.
It's just, people have to persevere with your early stuff though.
Yeah, exactly. Well, life's like that, innit? We all have to live. Well, I would love you to come back and tell us when you've done some more of this, Damon.
I would love to come back and share with you some more of my journey and my experience and whatever else I've discovered along the way. And I'm sure there's going to be some more difficult times.
Well, for me, the fact that I always try and gauge it like this. If I've enjoyed listening to your story, then, and I consider myself to be an average guy, an average biker, an average bloke who's interested in bikes and interested in being inspired by people, whether they set out to inspire people or not, then I think other people will be. And so I think people would love to listen to your continuing journey. And I've gone out of sync again. But that's all right.
Technology's like witchcraft, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So before we go, do you have any final thoughts, or would you like to talk about your socials before we wrap up? It goes without saying that I will put the links to your socials on this podcast and on the groups that I post it on, and I post it on all the usual ones, and I'll also put the posts on Apple Podcasts, etc. So you've got the links there. I'd really appreciate it if you could do the same for us.
Will do. Just email me the links and I can put them all on as well.
Yeah. Have you got any? Would you like to tell us anything about you? You did mention briefly, but if people can find you easier. So
my screen name, whatever you want to call it, my YouTube, everything is Demon Rides. On YouTube, it's Demon_rides. On Instagram, it's Demon_rides. But on Facebook, it's just Demon Rides, and that's across the board on all of mine.
Brilliant. I look like I'm still talking whilst you were talking.
Yeah.
I promise you, if you're listening on the podcast, what's happening now is that I'm about 5 seconds behind with my voice, so I've no idea why. But it's probably, as Damon said, the witchcraft of the internet and the fact that we're several thousand miles apart. That's what I'm going to go by.
Yeah, just a few thousand.
Not the fact that my phone's going flat, which I'm using as a camera. So, right, thanks very much. I'm going to let you get off into
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, and Happy New Year to you.
And you, mate. Yeah, absolutely. I would say keep in touch, please do, and we'll have a chat after this.
Yeah,
if you like.
For sure. In about a year's time when I'm at the bottom.
Yeah. And I'm sure everybody will wish you well and wish you a happy new year. Stay safe, ride carefully, and until next time, it's goodbye from me. Just goodbye from you.
See you later.
See you, mate. Thank you.
Bye.